that.
谢谢直播间的宝贝们，请关注一下。
sound effects.
You
I hate
love
the
them.
sound effects. It is the worst thing, actually, guys. It is the bane of my existence.
You know, if you like them, I wouldn't use them.
Stop slamming the door, please. Yeah, it's Wednesday, 6:30. Yeah, the breakdown. No, before we eat. Yeah, can we close the door and not slam it? Thanks. Literally working. Thank you.
Mine, I'm sure, will be in any second, just for fun.
Love it.
Literally said, don't slam the door. You don't know the difference between slamming
and this is the breakdown.
Favorite child.
Hey, everybody.
Another episode. And here's your host.
Hi, everyone. Guess what day it is?
Tuesday.
It is Wednesday. All day. Every day. It's my favorite day of the week, Wednesday. You know why? Because the breakdown happens. Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, aka the high-heeled gamer. It's Sunday, Bradford. It is not Sunday, it's Wednesday, the most magical day of the week. And today we're breaking down White Ash 2, Volume 2. Yeah. And with me is not Christopher, but Charlie Stickney. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Thank you so much. It doesn't really matter as long as I'm here. If you just want to call me something nice, I'm happy to be part of your show. So.
I appreciate you taking the time from your busy schedule to talk to little old me about your book. And I just appreciate it so much. So how are you doing today?
So far so good. I'm in Los Angeles, so it's a little bit earlier for me. So there's more of my day left in front of me. So it has a chance to keep going up or plateau and plummet. I'm hoping it keeps going up, just like I hope yours goes up as well.
Thank you. No, mine will definitely. It'll be great, and you have all the rest of the time of the world. While I, eventually have to feed my kids.
I know that time of day. Always fun.
It is. It's my favorite time of the day. So Charlie, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick. You're a writer, correct?
Yeah. So I'm a comic book writer. I've also worked in animation and in feature film, and I'm also currently the publisher over at Scout Comics. So I work in publishing now, and also take the time to write a lot of my own books as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you were also in publishing too. How is that like working on the other end of things where as you would be working for a publisher, you are now the publisher? What's that like?
Well, I think for me, it's been a really interesting transition. I started out self-publishing, like I think a lot of people who are doing comics, create their own comics do. And then I started working with Scout because they were going to be putting out White Ash. And then somewhere along that process, Scout and I had numerous conversations, and I was saying, well, maybe we could do this. And they were like, oh, that's a good idea. And there was a synergy there. And so then I sort of became part of the team. And then after a little while, I got to help lead the publishing division. So, it's been good in the sense that I come from a creator's perspective. So I am always looking to look out for the creator. But I can also be realistic about, what companies can offer you and what they can't.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal as publisher, when I'm wearing that hat, is to try to give each book the best exposure possible, give each creator the best chance to succeed. But they also have to, do their part too in terms of promotion, especially when it's an independent book. So I'm able to sort of sell, these are the kind of things that I've done. These things have worked, these things haven't. These are the kind of things Scout has done before. Let's have a dialogue and figure out the best way forward for your book. So hopefully it can succeed.
That's
So like,
cool.
so yeah, and like I spent some time on Kickstarter, and I occasionally go back there. And one of the best things about Kickstarter is that it's a community of creators, right? And when you have a project that's successful, when you have a big fan base, a big part of that is because you've bought into the Kickstarter community. You're an active member of that community. You're helping other creators promote their books. They're helping you promote theirs. You're sharing audiences, and so for me, when I came to Scout, I wanted to bring some of that, where anyone who was at Scout would hopefully feel like they were part of the team of creators at Scout, and together maybe we could promote each other's books and lift them up a little bit. Yeah,
No,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm like, it's like so for me, when I look to promote White Ash, one of the best things has been um, seeing the support on Twitter and Facebook from my creator friends. It's like that's the kind of thing that I love. I mean, it's wonderful when people are reading your book and they're loving it, but it's a different thing when other creators who spend time, writing their own stories, drawing their own stories, say to you, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to get out of my own head for a little bit, and I'm going to help you with your project." So, that's been really nice for me.
So you said something really interesting because we've had a lot of creators come on here and they're a part of Kickstarters and they do the Kickstarters, but nobody has ever really mentioned a Kickstarter like community within the creative field and stuff. So you feel like having that helped in the turn into the publishing side of things with that?
Well, I would say like I've been very fortunate on Kickstarter.
Okay.
I've built up a very strong following. To the point where I'm one of those people who lately, when I drops a project, it funds in a couple of hours, which is a
Wow.
nice place to be. So you're not worrying about it, and so it becomes more of a pre-order platform.
Okay.
But I'm constantly out there trying to advocate for other people, other creators on Kickstarter, to drive eyeballs to them, because I do have a robust fan base there, and I
Okay.
think there's that responsibility to give back, at least for me, because again, when things come easy to you in some ways, that then you have to sort of look and say, who's having a hard time? How can I bring them up? But the great benefit of that is the more people that you bring up, the more people who are in your network and who can, help your next book. And so your network continues to grow. So I think one of the reasons I've been so successful there is because I've been building this community of creators who I support, and they support me, and their people as well. And so like that has continued to you know to make things easier for me. It's just like, and I think like it's that community of support um, that helps you on Kickstarter. And I think the more of that we can bring to the direct market, where it's even harder to make traction, um, then you can be a success there, even if you're not Brian Michael Bendis, if you're not Gail Simone, if you don't have that name in comics already, if you're not Brian K. Vaughan, but all these other creators are recommending you to people who are putting their pre-orders in, it makes it a lot easier.
So how would one try to start to do a community like that? Because I don't think a lot of people realize that you can have a community within Kickstarter. Because a lot of people will just think of Kickstarter as the grind, where you put your book out and you just promote, 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 promote. But how do you start and try to nurture a community like that?
Well, I think you have to, first of all, you need to do it in a way where it's honest to who you are,
Okay.
right? You can't be just like, oh, I'm going to build a community so I can help my project, right? You have to be coming from a place of, I love comics, I want to see other people succeed, and then you need to support people who have a like-minded vision,
Okay.
and the same priorities. You don't want, like, there are different types of books on Kickstarter, right? And and different things succeed on Kickstarter, from books that are anthologies that are targeted towards a certain sexual orientation or race, or books that do well because of all the nudie covers. Like there's different communities, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's important that whatever your own sense, your own values are, whatever you're trying to bring as a creator, those are the projects that you're supporting. That that you're not just looking for the person who has the biggest amount of backers. You're
Okay.
looking for the person who has a project that speaks to you, because hopefully your project will speak to them. Maybe you engage in a dialogue and you start saying, I like what you're doing. And then going forward, hopefully, like you can DM them about doing backer exchanges. And after a while, like there are people who keep coming back to Kickstarter because it's good to them and it's a community. And I know like early on when I was just getting started, I had some champions on Kickstarter, and that helped me really level up. There's a creator named Pat Shand who does a lot of books on Kickstarter. He has a series called Destin New York, which is just a fantastic series. It's also coming out through Black Mask. He's done a
Right.
bunch of uh, books through Zenoscope and Black Mask and everything. And he liked White Ash, and he started talking to his backers about White Ash because he really liked it. And that all of a sudden brought me up another level. There was a great series called Skies of Fire, and I got to know Ray at the convention. I mean, that's his book, and like they were one of the first huge books on Kickstarter. They were one of these books that was getting 1,000 backers every project they did, and no one knew who they were outside of Kickstarter. And I got to know Ray at the convention, and I was like San Diego, I think 2017. He put like we were coming out with like the third issue of the original series of White Ash, and he put out an update on to his backers, and all of a sudden I had 100 new backers that
Oh,
day
wow.
when I launched my book that had never found White Ash before. So, and if people like your book, and especially if they're coming from a like-minded project, then some of those stick around for the next one. So like I said, so your fan base grows because you're building up a fan base that's a shared fan base with like-minded creators.
Makes sense.
And when any of those creators launch a book, I'm quickly on Twitter promoting their books. I'm on Facebook promoting their books. We talk at conventions. So, getting to know people on a human personal level and actually supporting projects you like. I mean, I think, it's just like networking in any aspect of life. It's
Hmm.
easier if it's genuine, if you're
Yeah.
trying to promote something you believe in, and you're not just going out of your lane to try to make a connection to, get to know someone. So that's, the what I've done on Kickstarter. And, at this point, I mean, I have several different, like I've got a Facebook direct message group with about 15 Kickstarter creators who
Wow.
support each other. I've got, several Discord groups that are just with comic book artists and writers. And this is all a community that I was not a part of in 2016. I came to comics back from film. Like originally when I was in college, I wanted to write comic books.
Oh, okay.
And like this was in the late 90s. And I interned at Marvel. I was looking
Oh,
to be a writer and an inker. And so I was thinking about moving to New York right after graduation. But I was also a film major. And then I got a job offer in Los Angeles. So I ended up coming out to Los Angeles and working in the film industry, working in animation because I had that job offer, because like I was able to find an apartment out here. So I just moved across the country.
hmm.
If that had not happened, I was probably going to try to do comics. So for me, I was planning to go to comics, kind of detoured into film and television for the last 15 to 20 years, and then I've come back to comics. But I knew people in animation, but I didn't know people in comics. So I have just spent the last 5 years building up a network there, both in Kickstarter and now in traditional, the direct market, creators who are doing things in both worlds. And again, it's your community. And
Hmm.
if you support your community supports you. So, but I should probably just quickly say, for those people who are seeing White Ash for the first time, it's a grounded fantasy tale. The quick pitch is Romeo and Juliet meets Lord of the Rings in rural Pennsylvania. Or the other pitch I like to say is, imagine the guys from Supernatural if they got stuck in Riverdale, but instead of battling demons from hell, they had to deal with the worst of Mordor. Um, it's high fantasy for people who don't love fantasy that gets too big, right?
Hmm.
It's set in a Pennsylvania mining town, um, about a young guy who's about to go off to college because the last thing he wants to do is be a miner like his dad was. And on the day he's about to leave, there's an accident at the coal mine, keeps him in town for a couple of days, and he uncovers something about his legacy, about the town of White Ash, that just changes everything. And that's where all the fantasy elements come rolling in. So, if you like stories like Harry Potter or The Magicians, probably more a little bit in line tonally with The Magicians, where it's magic and fantasy but set in our world, that's White Ash.
Okay. Yeah, so I actually liked the story of it because I do like fantasy, but I don't like where I can't pronounce the town or I can't pronounce the people's names and then something happens and I'm like, I don't even get what I read. I've read this page 3 times and I don't understand what I'm reading. But I like this not because it's just in a weird way relatable, I guess, or it makes it seem like, oh, that could somewhat happen, in the town next door type of thing. Were you have you always written like that where it was like I want it to be fantasy or mystery or whatever have you, but somewhat relatable? Is that always on the forefront or is that something that's like a happy accident that happened?
No, I mean, definitely relatabilities are important to me. One of the first things I used to love writing was romantic comedies, right? Back before they stopped making romantic comedies for the most part.
Yeah.
And then now those things are just streaming on Netflix if you're lucky. But when I was growing up, like romantic comedies were some of the best films that were being made. But with my love for genre for things like that, I wanted to do romantic comedies with a genre twist. So I wrote a script about someone who's in the vein of something like Click or Serendipity. If you remember those films from like the late '90s, where there was just a
Mhm.
bit of magic enough to make it interesting, but at its
Yeah.
core, it was about like it was that magical thing was showcasing some kind of flaw in the character, and they thought they could kind of fix it by magic, but ultimately they needed to do it with actual growth, and that's over the course of the movie. So that's where I come from as a writer.
Okay.
Um, I do think stories work well if there's something relatable at their core.
Hmm.
I grew up in a small town in Maine, and I think anyone who's coming from a small town, which is most of the world, right? Like there's
Yeah.
like I live in Los Angeles now, but there's not too many people who are fortunate enough to live in the big cities. And I think when you live in those small towns, you're always like, well, there's got to be something more, right? And you're kind of trying to figure out what that is, and whether it's people find answers in religion or they find answers in the relationships they quickly jump into. Like you want there to be something more. um, and so I think it's easy, because we all have that desire. It's easy to believe, especially in these small towns where it feels like there are all these things you don't know about the town because
Hmm.
it's so small and there's space, that these things could kind of go on there. I mean,
Yeah.
like there could be magic in the woods. There could be, some kind of secret society you don't, you never knew about. Maybe these people who you thought you knew really aren't the people you knew. Like
Yeah.
that's an easy supposition versus, like there's an intergalactic thing and you are the savior and you need to go onto this spaceship. I mean, like you can write the great version of that story,
Hmm.
you know. Like look, like you look at the Matrix, like that's a good version of that story, but like none of that aside from the person being a fish out of water is too relatable, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
this fantastic adventure, and it has to be so good. It has
It
to be
does.
so good to
Yeah.
be able to pull that off. And I think like with fantasy, because I love fantasy, good fantasy, it's really hard to do and make it feel fresh,
Yeah.
where it's not one of those things which is just filled with the crazy names and the whatnot. You
And
look like a show
cliches
like
too, like
right,
storming with
right.
cliches, and you're just like, I've read this already. Like.
Yeah, and you look at something like Game of Thrones, and I think the reason why people related to that early on was you didn't know where it was going,
Hmm.
right? If there's a show, like all of a sudden you're watching the series and they, kill one of the main characters like that, and you're like, oh, no one's safe. Now I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I thought this person was going to be the hero for the series. Now the hero's gone.
Mhm.
So you're off balance. You watch to see what's coming next. And I love doing that with my writing. I love to have the cliffhangers. I love to have the reveals. I think the first arc of White Ash is filled with those moments of, oh my god, I thought the story was about this, but it's about this, or this character is actually this character, and so like my tagline for the second season, or is what we're calling it right now, like season 2, the second arc, is same small town, all new secrets, because
Cool.
like the great thing about the first arc is it just established everything.
Hmm.
you know Now I don't need to waste time saying who these characters are. We can really kind of dive into the relationship. So if people like the first issue, then the second one is everything's leveling up, because I'm really able to dive in, and I have this timeline that goes over 3,000 years going backwards, and and I know where the book is. Like ideally the series is going to be about 60 issues. So it's been
Wow.
plotted out for that.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll get there, but I mean, it's helpful when you're also the publisher, you're putting the books out. Um,
Yeah.
but in addition to that, I have a loyal following on Kickstarter. I work with Connor Hughes, who's just an absolutely amazing artist, and Finn Cram.
Yeah, I did
So,
love the art.
yeah, like I think it's really important, like for people who want to check this book out. I mean, the art is so expressive.
It
It
is.
seems a little simplistic at times, but you look at it and you realize, oh no, like there is so much going on. The camera positions are so well
Yep.
considered. Like this is someone who knows storytelling, and
Hmm.
that and that's there, and the color is so good in terms of helping set the tone and the mood, and
Yeah.
together, like, yeah.
I did like the art style of it all. There's one scene in the comic where they're in the mechanic shop and there's a character off, and you can't officially see her face, but you can tell in the body language and in the detail that she's pissed. Like she is mad because the mechanic is like, "No, don't worry, I fixed this and everything's going fine." And it's the panel before this. And even though you can't officially see like all the tiny little details, you can still tell that that character is like ticked off. And I think that that speaks to the artist, that you don't have like, you're so talented that you don't even have to put the tiny little details for me to know that the character is pissed off. You know what I mean? Like where other people, you have to see the brow frowning and you have to see the lips. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. I
yeah,
noticed little minor little things like that.
yeah. Connor is so good at the body language and the posing. And when I was looking for an artist originally, I was like, I want someone who can do more than just draw, the angry, sexy face, right?
Hmm.
Which I think was like the staple of '90s comics. Everyone either had
Yes.
the angry face or the sexy face in every single issue. Um, and Connor was gravitating towards something that wasn't going to be all superheroes and capes, where it was
Mm.
something where he could show off some of his chops, in drawing and the posing. When he wants to, he can go, do incredibly detailed and rendered characters. But like someone like Chris Sammy, like he uses economy of line to get across the most important beats in
Yeah.
whatever he's doing. So
Yeah, and so I was also gonna say like the whole small town statement that you made. I didn't grew up in the city. I'm from the Bronx, but my mom is from Dominican Republic, from a really small rural town where everybody knows everybody. But we grew up with the folklore of like, the neighbor was like the evil witch, and this person did
right.
that, and you never know who's what. And so when we visited, it was always like, oh my God, are they gonna like bring out their cauldron and stuff like that? So that's kind of
Right.
what this story reminded me of. It's like those folklores that my mom used to say, like, oh yeah, our neighbor was a witch. And it's like, I mean, we might have elves next door. You never know.
Right.
But the romantic comedy too, like it was, I was thinking more of You've Got Mail, where it was they meet anyway in real life and through the emails. For those that don't know, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, You've Got Mail, they meet in real life, and then they meet, oh no, it's not Meg Ryan. Is it Meg Ryan? I don't know. But they
Yeah.
also meet online and they don't know that the other is the other. And it's kind of, in a way, letting you know that they're supposed to meet. And that kind of feels relevant with these characters as well. Like no matter what, it was like they were supposed to meet. Um, am I reading too much into this, or is that somewhat along the lines?
Well, I think if you're writing the characters correctly, the audience should be rooting for them to get together, right? They should feel like they are the people that are meant, to be a couple. And then your job as the writer is to put as many obstacles in their path as possible that feel like they're part of an honest narrative to the story, right? If roadblocks are popping up and it just feels like it was there for the sake of being a roadblock, but roadblocks that are germane to the narrative, that's what everyone wants. Like they're like, oh, I can imagine that thing just happened to happen. You can only get one or two coincidences, right? But
Mhm.
I think so for me, that's where a lot of the tension. It's like it's the will they or won't they, um, and so that creates a tension in the story where you're hoping, um, you know, beyond whatever epic tale it's telling, it's something very relatable because all of us know that kind of unrequited love or that those early stages of flirtation or
Mhm.
romancing someone where you don't know where it could go and it's incredibly exciting, and then you add a little bit of magic, you put it in a small town, and all of a sudden hopefully it's something special. um, but yeah, so for me, that's kind of where I come from when I'm trying to create characters that have that magnetic quality between them. And it's important that they both have their own agendas. It's important that those agendas conflict. It's important, like that they're in different places,
Mhm.
both emotionally and mentally. And like I think like in the first arc of White Ash, she is so much more in the know about what's going on in the town than he is. And so that already creates a dichotomy in terms of their relationship. Um, but he knows more about real life, right, than she does.
Mhm.
She's been very sort of, almost like the princess in a tower. She's been kept very protected and sheltered. So even though she really knows what's going on, she doesn't know how that impacts, the real world. Where here's with Alec, the main character. He's grown up in the real world and he knew nothing about it. He just knew he was short and he had to kind of deal with being a short guy in the real world. So um, yeah, so I
See,
I
I hear
think
that and I hear you've got mail because he's like all business, all go, go, go. And she's little bookshop in the corner and she's kind of oblivious and stuff. And that's why I relate it so much. And I guess that's why I like it because it's one of my favorite movies. And I was like, oh, it's kind of that, but he ends up finding out before her that, she's there, they've known each other online and stuff like that. And it kind of feels not your characters feel like they have their own individual growth to be had, but at the same time, so they're growing together, but individually. Is that, am I again reading too much into it?
no, I mean, because it's also about I think it's about that time when you are in your early 20s where you have to define who you're going to be, right? And up until in your teens and everything else, it's all about you're living under your parents' roof for the most part. And then maybe you go off to college, but it's not until you really leave college and you have to sort of decide who am I going to be on my own that we define ourselves. And I think when you're in your early 20s, you're like, my parents had nothing to do with who I am, right?
Mm.
I don't want to,
Yep.
like, I don't want to embrace that legacy. And then you get a little bit older and you're like, huh, maybe they influenced me a little bit. And
Yeah.
then as you get older, you realize so much of who you are is either, trying to live up to that example or trying to act in opposition to the example that your parents set, right? So I think so for me, these characters are they're in that special time in life when you get to figure out who you want to be. And like the whole first arc of White Ash is do I embrace my parents' legacy? Am I going to follow in the footsteps of my father, or am I going to be or am I going to throw this all off and say to heck with White Ash, I'm going off to college, I don't want to I don't want to have any of your craziness. This seems like a crazy thing that I knew nothing about. You've told me about it, but I don't want that, right? And in the end, he embraces the parts of it he wants, and he still gets to define his own identity, but it's an informed embrace. Whereas Lillian gets to see what it's like, how her actions finally affect other people, and so she's growing with the knowledge of the real world. So it's like who they start out as characters and who they end up at just in the first arc. There's so much growth for them as characters, and now they're in a position where they can really understand more about this this attraction between them and why it is, why it's forbidden, and things like that. And then it just sets the table going forward to have some good dynamics, and that's what you want. I mean, as a writer, you want to sort of create as many different chess pieces that you can put on the board,
Mhm.
because then it makes it easier as the story rolls out. And so we've mostly been talking about character and character development, but really like there's a big mythos here that goes back about 3,000 years and how it's going to be solved going forward. But it plays out in the day-to-day minutia of life, how that affects, the romance, the will they, won't they, and all of those things. So,
Because it's also world development too, right? It's not
yeah.
just the character, because the world evolves too, and they're in this world, and it has to somewhat change and adapt to them as well.
Yeah, and I think like that's also another thing that is difficult with high fantasy, in that you have all this world building as a writer that you've done, and maybe the minutia of you know what the first dinner was at the first night of the first feast in the town, and you've gone in, you built all this stuff up, but none of that matters.
Mhm.
What the readers want is they want a great story. They want to have a plan that they know you came from somewhere, that you're going for somewhere. So I think, as a writer, you need to know these things. You should know as much as you can about your world, but you don't need to tell the reader everything. You need to
Mhm.
tell the reader the things they need to know at the time they need to know it. So they feel like, nothing's dropped as a surprise in front of them, like they had the information all along, like it was there. But no one also wants the info dump, right? So
Yeah.
it's, and I think especially in something like this, it's trying to find interesting ways of giving the pieces of information that people want at different times, and find new ways to give the exposition out.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I like that a lot too, because as a reader, I don't want to feel like an idiot. But I also want that satisfaction of being like, oh, I kind of saw that coming, but I wasn't sure. You know what I mean? So I do like that your story flows so well. It's just, and then the panels, the artwork just brings the words just to life. And I didn't feel like it was hand holding either. I didn't feel like I was, I felt like I was reading a really good book, because it is. And the story flowed well, and next thing I know, the book was done, and I was like, oh, I want more.
Well,
So
it does move, like, I mean, like the first trade is 192 pages long, I believe,
wow.
and it moves pretty quick. It's a quick read, even though it was 6 issues, and most of those issues were oversized. So there's a lot of content there, and like in season 2, which is the first issues, that's coming out probably the 17th, but possibly the 24th. I mean, there's a lot of delays going on right now. So,
Mm.
if you are a comic book lover, have patience with your shop, have patience with
Yeah.
the publishers. Everyone's doing their best, but there's paper shortages. The printers are overwhelmed. The shipping is slow. And so all of those things are,
Yeah.
it's making it difficult, because even for even for the books that are completely done, and printed, just to get them on the shelves when they're supposed to be, it's a logistical nightmare right now, and everyone on the production end is trying their best.
Glad
So
you said that.
it'll be
Yeah.
out the 17th or the 24th. It's the first issue. It's a huge issue too. It's like 44 pages for the first issue
Wow.
of the second arc, which is only $4.99.
Where are they going to find that at? Is
That's
it
going
going
to
to
be
be in
comic book
Kickstarter?
shops. No, this is on comic book shops, coming through
Oh,
Scout
okay.
Comics. Yeah, the
Okay.
first issue. And then every issue after that will also be oversized. The shortest one is 28 pages, but the one after that's 32. I like longer issues,
Yeah.
for those people who like a real story. I don't want to do 20 pages a book with 3 splash pages, and then like 3 other pages that had 2 panels in it. So so
Yeah.
it's substantial reads. That's my goal.
Well, I am being told that we've hit our mark. So sad, because I really could hear you talk. Like, I love the way you think. I love the way you write. And it's just pretty cool that you've gone from the writing world to the publishing end, and you're looking out for those people. Because, in my head, it's always, once you go up that notch, you're just like, everybody else who, so it's just, it's nice that you're helping people get to the same steps that you're on. So that's pretty cool. I thought that was cool.
Well,
Real
I
quick
think,
before you go,
yeah,
Charlie, where can everybody find you? Are you on social media, your website?
yeah. I'm at Charles Stickney on Twitter. If I couldn't get Charlie Stickney, but I've got at Charles Stickney. I have an Instagram for whiteashcomic.com. People can find me at Scout Comics as well. And there's a White Ash Facebook page. So I am all over the place. I'm accessible. If you have a Kickstarter question, reach out to me on Twitter.
Aw.
If you have a publishing question, reach out to me on Twitter about Scout. Always happy to talk to people.
Oh, that's awesome. Good to know. So there you go, people. If you guys have questions, nice Charlie is willing to answer them. Just do it professionally and nicely. And if he can't get back to you right away, remember he's a busy man. So just be patient. So I always have to say those kinds of things because people be like, I sent it like 2 minutes ago. Why haven't you read it? I'm like, you got lives. But thank you so much for being here, Charlie. I really do appreciate it again, taking time from your busy schedule to talk to us and enlighten us about White Ash. Guys, go get White Ash. It is out. Do yourself a favor. It's actually a really, really good read. Like I said, I got to the end and I was like, oh, I want more. So go ahead and do that. And as always, guys, you know the drill. WTFcomicbooks.com, issueswithshow.com. I'm on Instagram, _breakdown_show. And that's pretty much it. You guys can find me at what you call it, thehighheelgamer.com. I'm there. All right, everybody. See you guys next Wednesday. Bye, everyone. Goodbye. Go get the White Ash book. It's good. Support local.